The theater also deserves attention. I do not consider it a counter-attraction to dissipation. There's plenty of time before and after the performance for a few minutes giving to passing pleasures that are so soon followed by satiety. Besides, people don't go to the theater every day. Amongst our vast population, there are but 4,000 who are in the habit of going to the theater constantly. I consider tragedy and comedy to be lessons in virtue and good sense and good behavior. Our poor are educated by the performances of such works which are held under our rule by the very countries who hate us. In face, he who condemns the theater condemns his country. Thank you. Theater has been a part of our culture ever since humans emerged from whatever we emerged from. The preceding words were written by the dramatist, philosopher, and notorious pot stirrer Voltaire on June 20th, 1733. And in his day, much like today, many people considered theater to be frivolous. But Voltaire maintained, as I do, that the theater deserves special attention and is worth more than just mere entertainment. Now, my journey with theater started in a very small rural Oklahoma town. And we didn't have a movie theater, no symphony orchestra, no art museum. The only cultural institution in my childhood hometown was the community theater. It was founded by a group of culturally starved individuals from surrounding towns, and they came together to create the only fully functioning arts institution for miles around, with the exception of the public schools. You may be confused because it says fire department. The theater was actually on top of the fire department, and the alarms didn't bother things too often, and I will tell you from experience that nothing can stop a rousing finale of the musical Oklahoma, not even fire engines. But why is theater important? Well, theater is a form of storytelling, and storytelling is ingrained in our very psyche and spirits. It's human nature to take the events of the world around us and turn them into a narrative story to store within our memory. As humans, we all use devices of narrative storytelling to categorize the things that happen around us. Dreams are a perfect example of us taking bits of information that we store and turning them into a narrative. You might say that dreams are little plays that go on in our brains as we sleep. Another example of inherent human storytelling is the way that true stories change over time. True stories is in finger quotes true, because it's been well documented that as we repeat a story over and over, if we change a small detail or make an embellishment to impress a friend, once that's been repeated many times, it can reform in our brains as an actual memory, as actual fact. My dad used to tell a story of being a child on the farm and leaving for school one morning and saw a dead monkey in the ditch. Well, in southwest Oklahoma, it's very rare to see a dead monkey in the ditch. So he went to school and he told all of his friends about this dead monkey, and they said, "We don't believe you." And he said, "I will show you." And he went back home planning on getting this dead monkey to bring to school the next day. But of course, he got home, jumped out of the truck, ran to the ditch, and all it was a burlap sack full of dirt. Or later on, when he would tell the story, it was a burlap sack with a huge snake in it. Or then later on, the story turned into a burlap sack with a possum inside eating sweet potatoes. I don't know how it got there. And I don't really know what the true story is, but the fact remains the same, that it is a true story of childhood disappointment, and a possum eating sweet potatoes is a little more interesting than a bag full of dirt. As humans, we also want to hear stories and use them to relate to our own lives. We take the things that we hear from other people and figure out how that applies to us. Good examples are religious parables and folk tales, and even that anecdote that you may have heard from your own grandparents about walking to school both ways uphill in the snow with no shoes. That's something that a lot of grandparents have taken and may or may not have happened, but they've incorporated into their own life history. As humans, it's also important that we share our stories with other people and also know that they've been understood. If you step into any wedding reception or classroom or TEDx event, you'll find people doing everything they can to share their version of the story. But it doesn't stop there. They want to know that the people around them can relate to the stories that they're telling. Now, theater specifically creates a shared storytelling experience. When people come together at the same time, in the same place, exclusive from the rest of the world, it creates a moment that will never be repeated again. Sure, if it's a play, the play might be performed again, and different actors might play the parts, and different audiences might see it. But those people in that place, for those fleeting few hours of an evening, when the curtain goes up, a living piece of art is born. And when the curtain goes down, it's laid to rest, never to be repeated in that exact form again. Theater also gives us the ability to examine ourselves as individuals. We see characters on stage and they come to life, and they come to life in our minds as well, and we think about them like we would people in our own life. And they are real people. They're actually real people on the stage, and they look like real people, and they sometimes act like real people, and they talk like different people because they've been given license by the playwright to speak more honestly than real people, and at least with less obstructed view of their minds. Theater also gives us the ability to examine ourselves as a group. When we're out in the real world and different people witness the same event, perspectives may change from person to person. People remember the details differently, so much so that we may never be able to recreate those exact events again. But in the theater, it's different, because the playwright has given an exact set of words to say, the actors have an exact set of actions to take, the audience sits there and watches the show many times from the same angle. And even though our emotional responses to the events that occur may be different, there's no disputing what happens. I wrote a play called All My Ex-Boyfriends Are Gay. But in it, the lead female character of Cass, for the third time during Act 1, breaks up with her boyfriend because he's gay. And the scene is very sad, and it's very serious in tone. But at one particular performance, the audience started laughing. And so the actress is on stage, and she's pouring with tears of sadness, but the audience kept laughing. They were overwhelmed by the humor of it. And so that night, the actors lived the scene differently. And they took a response and learned something from the audience and played the scene where they found the humor within the sadness. And in a beautiful and indescribable moment, that audience and those actors shared an experience that no one will ever have again. And that's exactly what I'm talking about when I say that communities need independent theater. In the United States today, most theaters, with the exception of a few cities where theater is a lucrative business, most theaters are supported by grant-funded nonprofit organizations, which is great. I fully believe that it's in the best interest of communities to make arts accessible like theater, make it accessible to everyone. But with grants and nonprofit boards and government money also come restrictions and parameters that must be met. A little over a year ago, I was involved with the production of a play. It was a well-known play by a respected playwright. It's been around about 15 years and been performed hundreds and thousands of times across the United States, but we were performing it right here in Oklahoma City for the first time. And even though it was a great and a very funny play, it was also very progressive in its subject matter and had thought-provoking storylines that questioned a lot of social conventions. And so because of laws here in our state that restrict the way that grant money can be distributed to certain types of content by nonprofit organizations that receive government subsidies. I know that's a mouthful. But because of that, major funding was denied. Luckily, in this case, we found out about it in enough time, and the artists involved with the production were able to host fundraisers, and we got lots of media attention, and many, many generous Oklahomans donated money so that the show could go on. And what was great about it is every single performance after the show, somebody stayed and thanked us for sharing a story like this. They never thought anything like this would be appearing in Oklahoma City, and we're grateful to have the chance to see it. So the big question then is, how can independent theater be funded without grants and nonprofit organizations? From costumes to sets to lights to paying the actors to theater space, plays are expensive. But as co-founder of the independent theater group Next Stage, we work with a model that makes independent theater sustainable and possibly even profitable. At Next Stage, we started with the idea that the artists and the audience were equal contributors. Everybody from the actors to the designers to the crew members to the people sitting in the back row that had purchased a ticket were equally important parts of the independent theater equation. We also wanted to make sure that the ticket dollars that the audience members spent went directly towards the production that they had chosen to see. This is very, very different than more traditional arts business models, where big portions of the money go to administrative costs and overhead expenses. So to start, we eliminated a lot of more expensive traditional practices with modern solutions that had little or no cost. Simple things like shared online documents and IP-based phone systems and several other free online platforms enabled us to take all of our administrative practices online and do things like production meetings and collaborating with writers that are out of state and marketing the shows with little or no expense, which freed up money for us to cover other things like paying our actors. One of the other most expensive parts about running a theater is the theater, paying for the space where people come in the audience and sit down and where people get on a stage and perform a play. So instead of leasing very expensive theater space, we partner with local businesses, such as a nightclub, and take advantage of empty seats and empty stages in early evening hours where normally it would go unused. So by taking advantage of unused business space, the business makes money by selling food or drinks, while we're able to keep more of the ticket dollar to pay for our expenses, including the actors. Now, it's very common among theater organizations for artists to receive a very small portion of the proceeds. This is especially true at small community theaters where actors receive sometimes no money for their efforts. And even though we weren't able to pay our actors a full-time wage, the amount that they made was directly proportionate with the amount of money that we took in at the door. Also, following our idea that the money that the audience pays should go to the play that they had chosen to see. Over the past 3 years, Next Stage has produced more than 10 original productions featuring the artistry of over 60 artists, actors, musicians, writers, directors, crew members, performing before thousands of people. All of the plays 100% self-funded and never losing any money. And although this was done on a very small scale, if it was performed on a bigger scale, all it would do is create opportunities for a wider audience to experience beautiful independent theater that discusses many of the topics that have been brought up today and makes them accessible to a wider variety of people. Hey, look at that guy, he kind of looks like me. So when you support local independent theater, a community contributes to the unfolding of its own story and contributes to the unfolding of its own story and its own history. You create the opportunity to enrich your own life and the life of others by giving a voice to stories that otherwise would never be heard. So whether you're a writer with a story to tell, or an actor who wants to interpret the journey, or a property owner with a space to host an event, or even someone who just wants to buy a ticket and see the show, when you show up and become part of a shared storytelling experience of live independent theater, the experience that you have definitely deserves attention. Thank you.